I'm your host, Bill Bulbeck. We're going to look at and listen to the music and artists that set the stage for the vibrant and ever-growing Christian music industry we enjoy today. Look at a man who, during his time with us, towered over his contemporaries and was a profound influence not only in the world of gospel music, but secular music as well. His work as an arranger and composer forever altered the way many gospel standards were performed. Gone were the slow, almost melancholy sounds, replaced by an up-tempo rocking lilt and a heretofore unheard-of complexity and drive. After growing up as part of a church choir, learning and refining his skills and talents along the way, he also became a teacher and mentor to a great many names that would go on to achieve their own legendary status, people like Aretha Franklin and Billy Preston. But even while changing the landscape of gospel music and enjoying unprecedented success as a performer and recording artist, this man also experienced difficult times that challenged his faith and could have jeopardized all that he accomplished. This man was the Reverend James Cleveland, who began his singing career in a South Side Chicago church congregation and wound up traveling the world with the most gifted gospel musicians of his day. James Cleveland was born in Chicago, Illinois on December 5, 1931. James entered the world at the height of the Great Depression, one of 5 children born to Rosie Lee and Benjamin Cleveland. As a young boy, he spent a great deal of time with his grandmother, who attended Pilgrim Baptist Church and was a member of the church choir. As a result of this, James found himself at the church sitting through what seemed to be endless choir rehearsals, bored out of his mind. Eventually, James decided to try to stave off his boredom by quietly singing along with the choir. During one of the rehearsals, his singing was noticed, and impressed, the choir director made James the choir mascot. The choir director, Thomas A. Dorsey, actually went so far as to write a song for James, which he performed at the church. Dorsey continued to teach and direct young James, and that investment of time and effort in the young man's life served to have a lasting impact throughout his career. Apart from singing, James also began to tinker on the piano, and through the process of trial and error, slowly developed his skill on the instrument. A keen ear and above-average ability to grasp musical styles helped him grow in his command of the keys, but his overall approach was deeply influenced by another person, pianist Roberta Martin. Mrs. Martin was the person James copied from, and she went on to provide a huge boost to the young musician's confidence when she published his very first composition, I Want to See Jesus. Under the watchful tutelage of Thomas Dorsey and Roberta Martin, James grew into an accomplished performer, writer, and player. He continued to be involved with the music at Pilgrim Baptist Church, but as a teenager began to sing with gospel groups outside the church as well. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately when one looks back, he severely strained his voice while singing with these groups, which damaged his vocal cords and resulted in the gravelly sound that would eventually become his trademark. Because of this, he spent more time focusing on the piano and musical arrangements. Before his 20th birthday, James left Chicago and moved to New York, where he became minister of music at Faith Temple, pastored by Bishop A.A. Childs. He met organist Herman Stevens, who also helped to contribute to the development of the young Cleveland. Not long after arriving in New York, James found himself on his way to Philadelphia, where he, along with Bessie Folk and Narcissus McKissick, a former member of the Martin Singers, formed the Gospel gospel group. Although the Gospel didn't last very long, they became very popular in and around Philadelphia. Cleveland continued his association with Roberta Martin, and was even hired by Martin for a time as a composer and arranger after the group broke up. His work as an arranger on old standards like Give Me That Old-Time Religion and It's Me, O Lord, transformed them into driving, energetic pieces that, to some, seemed unrecognizable from the usual interpretations. James left Philadelphia after a short time and moved to Detroit, Michigan to become minister of music for Dr. C.L. Franklin at the New Bethel Baptist Church. It was here that he met and began to teach a young 9-year-old Aretha Franklin how to utilize her incredible singing gift in the gospel music world. Aretha began to sing solos at her father's church after she turned 10. James left Detroit and moved back to Chicago for a little while, but returned to Detroit and assumed the position of second assistant pastor to Reverend Chris Craig Sr. at Prayer Tabernacle. The Fellowship of Prayer Tabernacle eventually yielded the famous group Voices of Tabernacle, organized by Cleveland. In 1954, Albertina Walker recruited James to join the Caravans, not only as a pianist, but also as a narrator-singer of hymns using his rough yet relaxing voice. In November of that year, Albertina arranged for Cleveland to do his first recording with the Caravans label, States Records. Cleveland would continue to make recordings with the Caravans until States Records closed their doors in 1957. While it might appear that James Cleveland was busy enough with his music and pastoring career before signing with Savoy Records in 1962, it could be argued that his work was truly non-stop afterwards. Not only did Cleveland record with the Gospel All-Stars and Gospel Chimes on Savoy, but he also now had his own group, the Cleveland Singers, who also recorded on the label, backed by a young pianist and organist named Billy Preston. Cleveland's success at Savoy didn't prevent him from moving to California, though, to become the minister of music at Grace Memorial Church of God in Christ in Los Angeles. It was during this time that the Savoy recording deal was about to come to an end, and James needed to complete one more recording to fulfill that contract. A bit frustrated by what he considered the lack of polished backup singers in the area, he contacted friend Reverend Lawrence Roberts of First Baptist Church in Nutley, New Jersey. James wanted to use Roberts' angelic choir to sing on his final recording session. Roberts agreed, and so James, along with his friends Thurston Fraser and Billy Preston, drove all the way from Los Angeles to Nutley, New Jersey. The resulting album, recorded in 1962, was called This Sunday in Person, featuring James Cleveland and the Angelic Choir under the direction of Thurston Fraser and Reverend Lawrence Roberts, featuring Billy Preston on organ. It was the first ever live gospel recording session. When released, Savoy had a massive hit on their hands. The label hurried to re-sign Cleveland to another contract and urged him to record another live gospel album. The second album with Cleveland and the Angelic Choir, labeled Volume 2, was an even bigger seller, propelled by the hit version of How Great Thou Art. With an audience eager for more, Cleveland and company recorded a third album, Volume 3, entitled Peace Be Still. Released in 1963, Peace Be Still became the first gospel album to sell over 50,000 copies and eventually sold over 800,000 copies, an astonishing number considering there was no mainstream promotion of the disc. Following the phenomenal success of the album Peace Be Still, James found himself on the road once again with his group, the James Cleveland Singers, featuring Odessa McCassell, Georgina White, and Eugene Bryant, along with Billy Preston on organ. 1964 brought a few changes to the group, with the loss of Eugene Bryant and the additions of Roger Roberts and Gene Bialy. In 1965, the James Cleveland Singers were traveling extensively, not only throughout the United States, but abroad as well. They had added Clyde Brown and Charles Barnett to the group, and it was this ensemble that produced a number of memorable recordings, including Heaven That Will Be Good Enough for Me, Two Wings, and The Lord Blessed Me Right Now. The James Cleveland Singers, populated by various personnel, continued to perform through the 1970s, 80s, and into 1990. The man from whom the group got its name continued to work with numerous other artists as well. One of the best-known pop music icons Cleveland worked with was Elton John, when James backed up Elton on the song Boogie Pilgrim. One of the projects Cleveland was most proud of, however, was the Gospel Music Workshop of America, founded by James and Albertina Walker in 1968. What had started out as a small group of musicians and vocalists in Detroit grew to become over 500,000 members nationwide. The annual Gospel Singers Workshop Convention, put on by the GMWA, has consistently helped launch the careers of countless young gospel talents. In 1970, Cleveland was fired by the Baptist church he was with in Los Angeles for emphasizing music over theology. In response, he formed his own church, Cornerstone Institutional Baptist Church. The choir at his previous church, incensed over his release, followed him to the new church, along with a large number of the congregation. There, Cleveland continued to preach the gospel primarily through music. In the early 1970s, James Cleveland had a new church that was growing rapidly. Recordings that were being made with various groups under his direction, and in all of that, he found the time to put together the Southern California Community Choir. The choir quickly developed a reputation for excellence, and apart from their own recorded works, provided backup for stars like Elton John, Arlo Guthrie, Aretha Franklin, and even rock group Kansas. Eventually, the pace of James's life began to take its toll, and he had to slow down during the last half of the 1980s. He started to suffer from serious health issues in 1989. Severe respiratory problems saw him hospitalized for a time, and he was unable to perform at his own tribute in October of 1990 due to a tracheotomy. Finally, on February 9, 1991, James Cleveland passed away from respiratory disease and heart failure. Although a bachelor, he was survived by a daughter, LaShawn, whose mother was alleged to be Jean Irvin, a member of the choir at Cornerstone Institutional Baptist Church. And although Reverend Cleveland was never reported as speaking of it himself, there were some who raised the question of his sexual orientation. During his lifetime, James Cleveland was the recipient of accolades and awards almost too numerous to mention. 5 Grammy Awards, the last of which was given posthumously with the Southern California Community Choir for their Savoy Records album entitled Having Church. Cleveland was also awarded an honorary doctorate degree from Trinity Bible College, and was the first gospel singer to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. A towering figure in the world of gospel music, the shadow of James Cleveland continues to loom large across the gospel landscape, and rightly so.